I was also racing in the Renault Spider then. I managed to get sponsorship to do that in England. So I got to know a lot of people in racing, and that's where I started to sell. I said, hello, it's Anders Hildebrand. Oh, hello, I'm calling from Cosworth Racing.
To have GT3 as a class, have all the manufacturers in it, is amazing.
Now it's huge expenses. And it actually affects the teams.
Yeah, one and everyone, just to clear that up.
To remember me, it's my trusted old Chevrolet pickup from 1972.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're at Silverstone. Thank you to the British GT Championship, and we've got two amazing guests today. One is Anders of Anglo American Fuels, who supply the Sunoco brand of racing fuels, not only in this championship, but across multiple championships. And we're going to find out from an owner of the industry, how is it possible to provide such fuels? Second part today is we have got the Ferrari team on that's competing a 296 GT3 in the championships this year, and we have got their driver Matt Griffin telling us the challenges they had to basically move a car from the hybrid road car the 296 Ferrari is to GT3 compliant regulations. Sit back, enjoy, listen. Anders, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much.
So for our listeners that aren't yet customers, what do you guys do, where are you based, and how do you deliver this fuel to the motor racing world?
Well, we are based down in Poole in Dorset. I've been there since I came to England in 1995. And the company specializes in race fuels and race oils. And we supply, as I said, a lot of championships ranging from British GT down to historic racing and anything in between. I think it's over 20 championships that we actually supply now. Yeah, and that of course means weekend works. So more or less every weekend between March and October is sort of, okay, where I'm going now then. It's sort of, it's pretty flat out. And we also distribute race fuels in Europe and Middle East.
Wow.
So we represent two big companies, Sunoco Race Fuels, which is arguably the largest producer of race fuels in the world, based in Philadelphia. And we also supply and distribute driven racing oils, which are bespoke oils for racing, competition or performance cars.
And let's get straight into the meat of that issue. Can you describe to our listeners, especially in, say, this championship, because some of our listeners will be fortunate enough to have cars similar that in the championship, what's the fundamental difference between that fuel and a high street, say, petrol at a petrol station?
Right. It's quite a big difference. Although both fuels are made from hydrocarbons, it's the quality and the consistency of the hydrocarbons that we use that makes the big difference. And also that we can, for these more highly strung engines, we provide fuels with a much higher octane. So instead of 99, which is the best you can get from the fuel stations today, we supply 102 octane fuel to make sure that there's no issues with detonation or knocking or failure of machinery, basically.
And just for our listeners, if you guys go back to early episodes, we actually broke the 200 mile per hour mark with fuels, and we spoke a lot about the knocking and smoothness.
Yeah.
What are some of the demands? Because obviously I've met some of the drivers today, we've met some of the teams. They are both successful drivers, successful business people. What are their demands from you as a fuel supplier?
We started to supply British GT in 2001. We were the first fuel supplier. And when we came onto the scene, there was BRDC that was running the championship. They wanted consistency. They wanted to have one fuel for everyone, so no one could actually cheat or tune the engine more than they should. And the first reaction was, "Oh, this is bloody expensive. Why do we want to pay more? We use normal pump fuel." Well, some may, but a lot of guys who had their own special brews they made at home or bought very expensive race fuel. So. It is basically to make sure that you have a level playing field. That's the main thing. But it comes at a cost, because if it's much more expensive to put fuel in a drum and also have it distributed to the team and make sure they get the fuel on time. Once the initial, this is expensive laid, and they saw the benefits of not having to go to petrol station and fill up with fuels that didn't really know what they were getting, or buy more expensive race fuels, they saw this is really, really convenient. And as long as they didn't have any fuel issues, they're all happy, because they know no one else has got a better fuel. So for the drivers, what they are asking for is basically consistency, service. Basically, the only thing they need to remember is to order the volume of fuel they need. And even if they don't remember, we have spare fuel on the truck. But so I used to race, and I build the business as from a racer's point of view or a team manager point of view. It should just happen. The fuel should just be there. And so we don't have much interaction with the teams or the racers. As long as it works, everyone is super happy.
So I think that there's some interesting things you answered there, but you also raised more questions for me. Cool. First of all, if it was unregulated, how would someone cheat in a fuel to get more performance?
That is actually quite easy, especially now with turbo engines.
Okay.
And electronic management system. We can make fuels that definitely give more power than the fuel we are supplying today. But that would then be more expensive, and then it would then benefit those with the really, really big pockets compared to those that are going racing on just what they can afford to get around with. So I think it's, what would happen is you would have people basically taking the mickey.
And next question is logistics, because pool is a beautiful part of the world. But I think you might even argue, even within the UK, it's not like in a city or next to a famous race circuit. Can you tell us about the logistics of your operation? And also, I think our listeners would be interested, has Brexit created any complexities when, for instance, you're doing wider afield that you said previously you do outside of the UK as well?
Yeah. Obviously, pool is not ideal when you supply race circuits, and especially in England. But it's such a lovely place, and I wouldn't like to live anywhere else. Saying that, I don't really know how it is to live anywhere else, because I only lived in Poole since we arrived. But it sort of adds an hour and a half to anywhere. If you were, for example, living in Silverstone, the roads are quite good, so it's not a big issue. It's a bit more driving, but no, it's. What did I say? Yeah, you asked Brexit, the B word. Yeah. Being Swedish, to be honest, I was absolutely flabbergasted when the vote that England or Britain was going to leave the EU, and I couldn't believe it. It felt like, really, what's going on here? Don't they want to be part of this community? And but once that has sort of settled down and the implications started to rise, I mean, before Brexit, it was very, very easy. The complexity with distributing fuel is that every country has their own petrol tax.
Yep.
It's like alcohol. It's highly regulated. But we had, before Brexit, the EU still has it. It's a EMCS, it's called. It's a custom database. So basically, from our bonded warehouse in Poole, let's say we're going to Spa.
Yeah.
We take in 15,000 litres. We put 15,000 litres on the database, and the fuel was transported until we got, with our own trucks, to the custom agent. And the custom agent then received the fuel we brought. We then did the race circuit, and then we went back to him if we had 1,000 litres, 2,000 litres left, and said, okay, we sold 13,000 litres. He then put the 2,000 litres we had left on the database to our warehouse, and we paid for what we sold. Simple. No custom agents involved. It didn't cost a penny. Apart from that, we paid 150 pounds to the custom agent just outside Spa. Come Brexit, first British GT race meeting at Spa. I sent my driver 2 days ahead of when he needed to be there, just to be sure if he had any small issues with customs. It took 2 days where he sat in the port because the custom guys at Zeebrugge didn't know how to do this because it was all new. Although they told me they knew exactly how to do it. It was quite frustrating. And then having the whole SRO championship sort of on my back. What is happening? Where is the fuel? What's your backup plan? I don't have a backup plan. This is not supposed to happen. Finally, we got there at huge expense. And then, because we have to pay all the VAT, all the taxes, all the input duty up front. And we don't get anything back if we don't sell everything. And we can't export it either, because then you have have to have a special export license from Belgium to get it into the UK. So it was just, oh no. So from being smooth, costing more or less nothing, now it's huge expenses. And it actually affects the teams.
You're a fuel expert. I say you've been making this 102. There's been quite a big drive across different motor formulas for drop-in fuels that are different consistencies, whether it's British touring cars or Le Mans or even, myself being in the truck business, we put HVOs in there.
Yeah.
I'm just interested where you see the future going, because you've obviously got the expertise, all the infrastructure, but the actual 102 liquid might change due to regulation. I was just interested where you see it going.
Yeah, there's a lot of things going on, and we work with both the governing bodies, Motorsport UK. We work with, of course, all the championship organisers, facilities. Everyone wants to reduce the impact on pollution and carbon footprint. So we are reacting to demands. For example, we supply fuel for Goodwood events. The Goodwood members meeting is coming up soon, and the Goodwood Revival was the first historic event where every car had to run on fuels containing at least 70% sustainable components.
Oh wow!
So and it started even a year earlier when the Porsche 911 race had to run sustainable fuels, and we created a fuel for that, and we developed more fuels, because unlike modern cars, historic cars don't have lambda sensors or computers that can adjust to the fuel. They have the carburetors, basically, and they're typically quite crude and rely on high octane fuels. And that's a bit of a problem, apart from the cost side, because sustainable fuels are sustainable if they are made from waste components.
Yeah,
that's the whole thing. To use byproducts from food production that can't be used for anything else, or from forestry, or from municipal sort of waste. We can make components that are more or less the same as hydrocarbons made from crude oil. But it's a longer process, it's very energy intensive, and it costs more money, basically. But it can be done, and we proved that. We proved it at the hardest racing there is, which is classic racing, historic race cars. And remember, these cars at the Revival, they are from early 1900s.
Yeah.
And quite crude machines, and they need a fuel that can protect the engine, because we can't change the engineering or the mechanics of the vehicles. We couldn't just give them one fuel. So we actually developed 5 fuels.
Wow.
And we even supplied a sustainable methanol because all methanol now is industrial, but we found a source we could make it from sort of forestry waste, sorry. So it's a lot of challenge to do that. And the British GT fuel, we are not going sustainable full out yet because of cost. We are, so far we're running 10% of sustainable components. There's a desire from the organization to improve on that, but it has to be done in a way so we don't kill their client base because of high cost.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think people must always understand that, because we've seen that with industry, with series, is that ultimately things like these championships reflect the marketplace. They need to
Yeah.
reflect what the person's doing on the high street and so on,
Yeah.
and to get in there. And I've always been amazed, actually, though, when you are set the challenge. I remember I was involved in British truck racing. We were able to run 100% bio products, GTL products, but what I think is exciting, it does look across the world that drop-in fuels, whatever type of liquid it is, will be the main part of the solutions going forward into the next decade.
Yeah, it would definitely be a big part of the solution because we already have the cars.
Yeah.
We are talking about reducing the carbon footprint. The worst thing we can do is to replace the fleet of cars or trucks we have with something else before they are worn out.
Yeah, 100%.
And that's the key thing. And right now, the focus has been on electrical vehicles, and there's nothing wrong with electrical vehicles if we have clean energy to power them. But the infrastructure is not there, so it's a huge impact on the earth to actually put the infrastructure there, which means big carbon emissions. Whereas we could actually, if the investment had been put into actually making these fuels, because the technology is there, but the government is so short-sighted. They look at what can we quickly do here. And EV is sort of like the survivor of the earth. And of course, the car manufacturers are super happy because they sort of shot themselves in the foot a bit here. But the quality of the cars are so good now.
Yeah.
So if you have a car that is 20 years old, it still goes and it's not corroded away. I remember my first car was an MGB GT. It was 9 years old. And I had to replace all the seals, I had to rebuild the engine. They were not built to last. Today, a 9-year-old car, it's like, wow, it's the new car.
Yeah.
So they last so long. So unless they produce the clientele, the people that can drive a car, increase it dramatically, the sales of cars is going to go down. Unless they replace the existing vehicles. So for car manufacturer, the EV is great. We can sell cars.
But then you defeat the point of being a cleaner overall.
Exactly. It doesn't make any sense at all.
So going on to that, one of the challenges that I think any biofuel has is potentially water content. And the reason I'm raising this is not so much in the racing side, but one of our listeners, Hans, is a good friend of mine. He has a big collection of cars and bikes, and I recently did a sort of half an hour special with JM about fuels, what's good for your cars. But Hans asked me some really good questions that a lot of car collectors or bike collectors had, and it was about what fuels should you put in a vehicle that potentially, as you say, like a Goodwood vehicle, might only come out once or twice a year, and the rest of the time it's in storage. And I know your company also does various different things that aren't just racing fuels, almost perhaps for this very issue about where essentially the machine needs fuel, but it's not either being raced or used daily. And I was just interested if you could give our listeners some insight.
It is a huge issue, the fuels you buy from petrol stations today, with ethanol content, bio content, because the ethanol absorbs moisture, and after a while when it's sat in a tank, it becomes acidic. It forms a type of bacteria called acetobacter, which excrete acid, and that goes then in and takes away the natural oxidation layers on the brass and copper and aluminium, etc. And then it be full acid attack on the metal, so you get sort of powder in the fuel system. The fuel goes off very fast. It's a nightmare, basically. And we have since 2006 been selling a garden machinery fuel called Aspen. We got 650 retailers selling it now, and it actually sells like hotcakes there because it cures all the issues. You can leave the fuel in the chainsaws, or trimmers, or lawnmowers for up to 5 years, and it doesn't go off. It just runs. So for the classic car industry, we developed a fuel 3 years ago for the, as I said, cars, bikes, and boats, machinery that's not used on a regular basis, but run on normal pump fuel during the summer. We have developed a fuel that you flush the system with, and then you let it sit in the cars or bikes or boats for as long as you like, and then you just turn the key and they start immediately. without having affected the fuel system at all. The fuel is 99 octane. You can run on it all the time. But of course, it costs more. It costs £5 a litre nearly. So if you don't do lots of miles, you can run it all the time. Otherwise, you just need 5-10 litres to flush out the system and make sure you have this fuel in all the time. And then it just works. And thanks, and because we have this big network of garden machinery dealers, they can order this fuel for the cars and bikes, because it's not the same fuel as you put in your lawnmower or chainsaw.
Imagine,
yeah, because you need a little bit of aromatics in, which is not a perfume. Aromatics are double bonded hydrocarbons like solvents, etc. You need them to make sure that the seals doesn't dry out. If you put a garden machinery fuel in a car, that can happen, and then you get leakage. It can then be fire, etc. We don't have those issues in a chainsaw or lawnmowers.
Obviously, I stalked your LinkedIn last night, and I see that you grew up and studied in Sweden. What led to the move to Poole?
Well, yeah, for my whole life, it seems to me business has grown out of my passion or interest or hobbies. So my first business was windsurfing and alpine ski shop, because I was keen windsurfing and I did alpine skiing in the winter. I did that parallel when I was at university, and then it took over, so I actually never finished my studies, unfortunately. Sorry, Mum. I was importing replicas of GTD 40s.
Oh, wow.
And they were based in Poole, GT Developments. So I was selling them and started racing them, because all my life I've been a petrol head. I'm absolutely mad about sports cars. And so I imported these cars and sold them and built them and raced them, which was great fun. And then one day the company told me they are developing a modern GT40. So this was in mid-90s, early 90s. And Ford, they hadn't even thought of the Ford GT. So this little company then made a monocoque chassis with a modern Ford V8, and beautiful bodied, designed by Len Bailey, who designed the original GT40.
Yeah.
So it looked really, really good, and they called it the Spectre R42. And they said, well, you are our best distributor worldwide, so you obviously know how to sell things. I said, well, all right. so they asked me, why don't you come over to England and be our sales and marketing director? I said, okay, that sounds fun. But I mean, how can you say no if you're mad about sports cars and supercars? And so I asked my wife, am I allowed to go and work a bit in England? I'll come home. She said, okay, yeah, let's do that. And we had our two small children, Axel and Sophia. So I was commuting for 2 years.
That's tough. I've done that myself with small kids, long commutes. You love your job, but also you love your family. It's tough.
It was tough, and I can't recommend it for too long period, because we started to feel the tension, and then we decided that this can't go on. But and the job was good, it was well paid, and so I got them to come over, and we bought a house, sold everything in Sweden, and everything was fantastic. The kids got settled at school, learned how to speak English. My wife, she said, I'll give it 1 year. If I don't like it, I'll go back. With or without you. I said, okay. And she loved it. She really, really liked it. Of course, a big challenge, new language, new way people act, and because we are more different than you think. And when So 98 then, when everything was fine, the company went into bankruptcy. Not because I couldn't sell all the cars they built, they couldn't build them fast enough.
Cash flow.
And they were more or less prototypes, all of them, and they cost way more than the selling price, unfortunately. So that led me then, so then we had the house, everyone was happy, but I had no job. So my friends and my family said, you need to be responsible, you need to get a normal job. And I was offered jobs like selling computers, and I said, I don't even like computers. How can I do that? It doesn't work for me. And then I was also, when I was racing in Sweden, I was sponsored by an American oil company called 76 Lubricants. And I was also sponsored by a company called Auto Trader, but the Swedish version. And so I got free adverts for them. So for my other sponsors, I sold the sponsorship for the car, but they got an advert.
Yeah.
And I had some adverts left to sell. So I thought, okay, no job, it's going to be tough. I better try to sell these leftover adverts.
Yeah.
So I rang this company, which was based in Sweden then, the European office, and said, hey, I have these adverts. Can you buy them? I need some money. No, we're not really advertising, but we need someone in England to sell our oils. I said, okay. They said, do you know anyone? I said, well, I haven't got anything to do. How hard can it be? So I asked all my friends, my family, and they said, no, don't do it. You need to be responsible. My wife said, let's do it. You love working for yourself. Let's give it a crack. And she was the one that had the most to lose.
Yeah.
So we bought the container. I set up on the road. I thought this is going to be easy because 76 was the fuel of NASCAR and the oil of NASCAR. So good brand, and I knew the product was good. And it was bloody hard work because no one knew the brand, and I used valve lid, mobile. Why should I fix it if it's broke and all that? But I was also racing in Renault Spider then. I managed to get sponsorship to do that in England. And late in 2000, I did TVR Tuscan Challenge. So I got to know a lot of people in racing, and that's where I started to sell.
I think then just going to quick fire questions that we kind of ask all of our sort of directors we have on board and leaders, and just quick answers to these.
Yeah.
But the first is, what would you like government to do for the fuel industry in the next 12 months? Whether that's the British government or a different government, but let's maybe we're at the British Championships there.
Yeah.
So like what would like to see the British government do in relationship to fuels in the next 12 months?
They need to invest money. We invested a bit of money 3 years ago when Zero Petroleum started their journey. Paddy Lowe, Formula One, McLaren, etc. He has developed a process to carbon capture and make fuel of that from hydrogen and carbon dioxide.
Yeah.
It works. They can produce it, but they need millions.
Yeah.
They need. And it's peanuts. They need $20 million, and they have a plant that can produce fuel that can then be put up in different places. That's the type of investment the government needs to do now. It's peanuts, but they need to help the leaders in this industry to do that, so we can get the sustainable fuel actually not just talking about, actually making it happen. They need to invest in that, and they need to help these companies that are forefront. We have the technology, we have the smart guys, but they can't find the money to do it right now because they are all investing in EV cars, which is not going to work short time. Maybe in 20 years it will work, but we need something now.
I also think it will never work, and the reason I say is I think you'll get certain markets like the UK, France and Germany. I'm fortunate enough to travel around the world. When you travel around the world, you see the complexities, the aftermarkets. You know, when you go to someone like Mauritius, they are buying a bus that originally was used in the UK, then used in India for 30 years, and then they're getting the vehicle at 35 years. So there's just so much of the world that will always be on liquid fuels of some form. I totally agree with you. And obviously you took a punt on racing fuels when you saw those people coming up to you about racing fuels. But where in 2025 would you invest your money in the energy market?
In exactly where we started to invest into making sustainable fuels.
Okay.
There's one plant in Europe now that makes sustainable hydrocarbons from generation 2 ethanol. There's one plant in Europe. Every race fuel manufacturer relies on these guys. We need more plants. We need cheaper components so we can drive the price down. That's where we need to invest money.
What would you like customers to do in 2025? Because I feel that people don't realise, but the movement and where people spend their hard-earned money actually really alters what fuel companies do. So I'm just interested what you'd like customers to do in the next 12 months.
I think they should keep buying and running cars, diesel and petrol cars, but demand more sustainable fuels. Yeah, that's what they can do. They can. If they can do that, that would be great, because I hope maybe as they are voters, maybe the politicians will listen to that. I have a fuel that you can put in the car, no problem, but it would cost £5 a litre, £6 a litre, including VAT. With the technology there, it's not going to be more expensive than crude oil. So we can hit the same prices within 10 years if the investment to make the plants were available.
Anders, we've loved your contribution to the podcast today. We're definitely going to sneak along to a few rounds this year. Hopefully we'll get in Goodwood and Spa as well. And it'd be great to see you and great to see those wonderful machines competing with each other over this season ahead in the championships. Thank you, Anders.
Dare I say, the biggest part of the announcement was that Ferrari is back in British GT. First time I say since 2020. No, Matt. I mean, Matt's a big deal, but not as big as having a Ferrari. And first time we've got the 296 full season as well. I think the stat is you have won or at least driven every iteration of Ferrari GT3 car ever built. How does the current 296 compare to that very first one? I think it was a 430.
Yeah, I've won in every one, just to clear that up. Look, it's a progression. In terms of lap time, I would say that the 296 is probably 10 seconds quicker over a lap. But actually, when you're driving the car, no matter what car you drive, and this is the same with the GT4 cars, you're always on the limit. And over time, it's not just the Ferrari GT3, it's GT3 cars in general. In the last, say, 15 years, they've come on remarkably, and they're probably closer to a prototype now than a kind of a standard road car. And they started as standard road car. The first Ferrari GT3 was a Ferrari Challenge car upgraded to a GT3. The first Porsche GT3 was a 997 Cup car. Now, if you look at the 296 Challenge compared to the 296 GT3, it's like looking at a Ford Fiesta and an F1 car. They're completely different. So it's just the advent of GT3 which really has supercharged the world of GT racing. You say, this is the golden time of GT racing, but 5 years ago it was as well. So to have GT3 as a class, to have all the manufacturers in it is amazing. And obviously, for me, Ferrari is really special to me. I've made my entire career with Ferrari. I think if you cut open my hand, I'm like a stick of rock, and there's a cavallino in the middle of the bone. And they call me Matteo Grifoni. I speak Italian. They say the Irish flag is an Italian flag that they left out in the sun. So it is really, really special for me. And then also to be back here in British GT, alongside my other programs, also with Duncan is amazing. So really looking forward to it, nervous and excited, and I'm also looking forward to going kind of door to door and wheel to wheel, because the last few years I've been mainly doing ELMS and WEC, which is all fantastic, but it's a different style of racing. And I'm lucky enough, I'm a professional, I get paid for this, but I would, don't tell Ferrari or Duncan, but I would do it for free. And I love going wheel to wheel and banging doors, and I am looking forward to doing a bit of that this year.
Hi, Alex Wolfe from the largest energy podcast on Apple. I'm really interested, especially with your experience over all the different Ferraris, to get something that was originally a hybrid to meet GT3. Is there any complications from a power unit, transition point of view, development that's different from when you took petrol cars in the past to get them to GT3 calibration and standards?
Yeah, I think in the development of the car, because obviously the road car has a hybrid system to help that first bit of acceleration, we missed a bit down low in the car, and the throttle response out of the corner was nothing, and then everything. So that takes a lot of work and a lot of development with Ferrari and Orica, who built the car, in terms of managing the boost, managing how the turbo comes in, managing the throttle map, and it's one of the things that definitely has changed in the turbo GT3 cars. I think it's quite consistent across all the turbo cars, is that your throttle pedal is not linear, and it takes a bit of getting used to. We saw in Melbourne last week, guys going off left, right and centre, where you get a big bang of torque. and we have that. So that was one of the biggest things with the car to roll that out, because all of a sudden you're out of the corner at a certain acceleration and it feels like you've gone full throttle. So yeah, and that's, I think, directly linked to not having a hybrid system, but we have it now to a point where it has become really drivable. I think that the tyres as well in GT3 from all the turbo cars have come along to help that. The manufacturers within the Ferrari, at least, we have a thing called a torque reserve, which is kind of like an anti-lag system, I suppose. But it's to do with throttle not being linear. So in terms of driving them, we drive them completely different to the way we used to drive them. And for a lot of times you're kind of hanging on to them on the exit of the corner, but I'm Irish, so I love rallying, so that works perfectly for me.
Guys, that's amazing. We've really found that, from Sweden to Poole, Anders has a great journey to supply fuel to the whole industry and make these championships work, where you've got Ferrari, Lamborghini, Lotus racing itself. We also heard from Matt, the Flying Irishman, that essentially that even with the hybrid move, he's very confident the 296 is going to win races this year, and he talked about that surge in torque. If you've enjoyed this podcast, download, listen, subscribe, tell your friends. But also, we have an Investors Day coming up on the 21st of May. If your company would like to grow with the Wolfe Power Club, please get in touch, and the show notes below, it will let you know how you can do that. Thanks very much for your indulgence. Have a great week, everyone.